in a failed coup attempt in the Congo. Welcome to This Week in Africa, a collaborative effort between Authentic African and African Stream, where we break down this week's breaking news and its impact on Pan-Africanism and Africa's independence. So today we delve into the recent failed coup attempt in the Democratic Republic of Congo, where 50 people, including 3 American citizens, were arrested on May 19th, 2024. The coup plotters, primarily followers of the opposition figure Christian Malanga, aimed to overthrow President Félix, and Malanga was actually killed during the attempt to infiltrate the president's palace. The involvement of American citizens in Malanga's ties to the United States have sparked speculation about the possible U.S. role in the coup. This incident raises questions about the DRC's geopolitical dynamics, especially the president's positive relations with the Western countries and his recent visit to France for support. So stay tuned as I and Inem Richardson discuss the implications of this event and the political hidden players behind the scenes, as well as other pressing stories from around the continent. So before we get into today's story and the other stories, we like to do introductions, so you guys are all familiar with who we are. I will turn it over to Inem to do a quick introduction before I introduce myself.
Okay, greetings. So hi, I'm Inem Richardson. I am a journalist over here at African Stream. I am based out of Ouagadougou, Burkina Faso, where I am the co-founder of the Thomas Sankara Center for African Liberation and Unity. And I am also a member of the All African People's Revolutionary Party. So greetings from Burkina Faso.
Excellent. And I am Joe Hatagwa, American-born Sierra Leonean. Spent a little over 4 years living on the continent full-time. I am now back and forth between the United States and the continent of Africa, lived in Ghana and Sierra Leone. I run a platform called Authentic African. Our goal is to bridge the gap between Africans living on the continent and Africans living in the diaspora. We focus on Pan-African news, history, art, culture, and politics, as well as investing in real estate, investing in real estate, building businesses, and traveling to the continent. So with that, I thought we could jump right into today's stories. And the first story is quite an interesting one. It's a failed coup attempt in the Congo. And so we're going to talk a little bit about it, and then we'll watch the video, and we'll have some comments on the other side. So, as I mentioned, U.S. citizens among the foiled coup attempt in Congo. So on the 29th of May, 2024, a coup attempt was squashed in the Democratic Republic of Congo. 50 people, as I mentioned, were arrested, notably 3 Americans. Most of the coup participants are believed to be followers of Malanga, an opposition figure who was present during the bid to seize power. As I mentioned before, he experienced loss of life because he refused arrest during the attempted infiltration of the presidential palace. The coup participants made it clear that their desire was to bring down the Congolese president, who was away at the time. Many are speculating about the U.S.'s possible involvement, obviously given the presence of at least 3 American citizens. And so with that, the question is, what was the DRC being targeted for threatening war against major U.S. and Western allies, ally Rwanda? Others point to the fact that the Congolese president also maintains generally positive relations with Western countries. So he recently visited France to request support from the president, Emmanuel Macron. And of course, his main opposition, Christian Malanga, only has very few fringe followers. So further driving speculation that other players are operating behind the scenes. So with that, let's jump into the video, and then we'll have some commentary on the other side.
Vandaki ba 3 heures tout le monde a boue événement ça la makuna masasi beti toyebi pourquoi masasa ondenge ebetelaki toyebi te soki eza barwandais soki eza banani.
On May 19th, 2024, a coup attempt was foiled in DRC. Armed men stormed the residence of the deputy PM of economy. 2 guards and an assailant were killed in the shootout. The presidential palace was also breached. Opposition figure Christian Malanga was shot dead there after resisting arrest. His Free Zaire movement is suspected of organizing the plot. Assailants raised the flag of Zaire, DRC's previous name.
Nous Zaire! Félix, we're coming for you, nigga.
The coup bid has shocked residents. Okay, I think the video cuts off here.
Okay.
Okay, let me see. Well, actually, let me see one more time if it goes to the end.
Okay.
Félix, we're coming for you, nigga.
The coup bid has shocked residents.
Okay, so it does look like it cuts off there.
Yeah, it's a technical issue because you can see it's still like there's a port of the video, but I don't know why on StreamYard it's not going to play the end.
Well, I mean, obviously those of you who are watching can go back and watch the video. It is definitely on the Instagram page for African Stream. So if you guys want to check it out, it's there. You'll just scroll down to last week's post and you'll see the post. We just described the headline, so you'll see it. It's very visible on the screen. And so with that, I think the question then to you now, Inem, is what is your take on what's happening and what happened with this coup? And are there any updates that we have as African Stream has been looking into this over the last week?
You know, I think it's interesting, this coup attempt. I mean, for one, it's just like it seems incredibly sloppy. It doesn't seem like it's that serious of an attempt. Tshisekedi was not even in Kinshasa at the time, and they targeted, sort of a political ally, but it doesn't seem like something that was all that strategic in terms of like people actually seeking to legitimately overthrow the state. A lot of people have been looking, like a lot of different journalists, investigative reporters have been looking into like who these US citizens are that are involved. It's actually unclear. So the United States government came out and said that they're not clear as to whether or not this particular opposition leader at the head of this, Malanga himself, is a US citizen. One of the confirmed US citizens is his son, Marcel, who was involved. I think that link in terms of how his son got involved is a little bit more obvious. Then the other 2 US citizens that have been identified, it's very blurry in terms of like how they came into this. One of them has a criminal record for smuggling marijuana, and then the other one, he seems to be a bit of more of a random connection with his family coming out saying that his reasons for being in Africa, as far as they know, had nothing to do with politics. I think what is actually the most interesting here is sort of why are people from the US citizens interested in overthrowing Tshisekedi? Like what's going on in terms of like why any sort of US involvement would be wanted in his, or why there'd be any sort of interest on the side of US passport holders in Tshisekedi's overthrow. One of the comments we just received regarding this is somebody saying that Congolese president is a US marionette. He is even a friend with Kagame. I think it's interesting because Tshisekedi kind of tries to play this role where he flirts with the idea of approaching Russia or China, but then like at the same time, he has been much more of a Western ally than not so. Even recently when he's coming out to talk about issues with Kagame in Rwanda, we see at the beginning of this month, like mentioned in the comments, who does he run to? He goes to Emmanuel Macron and says, Emmanuel Macron, like I need help and assistance in what's going on in the Eastern DRC. So he doesn't really seem like he's necessarily a threat to the West at this point. He seems like he's somebody who, despite some talk every now and then, is more than happy to honestly serve Western interests. It's like what we see with the UAE recently. We've talked about this in the previous episodes where, there are certain deals being signed where the UAE is having access to Congolese resources to the detriment of the people. And so this whole sort of system where Rwanda is able to get these resources, Uganda as well, we tend to talk about Rwanda, but Uganda, other neighboring states, to get these Congolese resources from the Congo into, the West. I do think that there is some extent to which Tshisekedi is implicated in this and does have some responsibility here and does still maintain overall a good relationship with these Western countries that are really exploiting Eastern Congo and sucking Congo dry. So it's like, why then is there this coup attempt? And then, so I think there's a lot to sort of speculate here. I've heard some people say that from the standpoint of maybe optics, it does kind of look good for a leader if it does seem like there's a big effort to have him ousted. So that could be a possibility. If this is something that is orchestrated within the United States on a higher level than just, random players as we're being led to believe right now, if this is something that, is actually was really planned out. The other thing is, it is true that the West and the United States does recycle leaders that are favorable to its interests when the timing is right. So we saw this in Gabon when Ali Bongo was overthrown. And again, Gabon continues to remain overall a country that is very friendly to the West and the sort of global imperialist system, even though there was a coup against a former leader that was a Western ally. We see this in Haiti a lot. We've seen it since pretty much the 2004 coup that overthrew their president, Jean-Bertrand Aristide, pretty much just a recycling of various leaders that have served Western interests, but also just keep getting booted. So I don't know if this is a serious coup attempt to begin with, but if it was one, perhaps there is too much noise going on in terms of Rwanda and Congo and what's going on. There's a little bit too much awareness. Perhaps it's the time to change strategy on that part of the imperialist system. So I think there's still a lot that we don't really quite understand about why the coup happened. And again, it just was so sloppy and poorly executed. And, I will say also from the standpoint of optics, it doesn't seem like, this would have been a coup that would have been, it doesn't seem like the kind of thing where it's like whoever is behind this is thinking that this coup was going to fool the people into being, favorable towards it. They were holding flags of the former country of Zaire. Mobutu called the DRC Zaire, making reference to that era and screaming "Free Zaire." So it doesn't really seem like the kind of thing where it's like, the end goal is that the masses of Congolese and people worldwide see this as some sort of victory or sign of progress. So I don't know. I think there's still a lot to unpack in terms of like how odd this kind of particular coup attempt is. Right. How to this day we don't really know who exactly these U.S. citizens are. Like we have their names, but like how they all met and got involved in something when a couple of them have no obvious links to anything sort of political within Africa. Right. I think there's still a lot of investigative work that needs to be done.
All great points. And, obviously this last week was quite an eventful one because we're going to talk about Burkina Faso's failed coup attempt as well. I do want to mention some more breaking news that happened just over the weekend that we'll want to discuss further in next week's live as we get more information about it this week. But I do want to mention that Sudan's paramilitary rapid support forces, or the RSF, launched a major offensive against the army's stronghold in Darfur, one of the largest regions in Sudan, with a pre-war population of almost 10 million. According to Doctors Without Borders, more than 130 people experienced loss of life in the single hospital during the RSF siege. And more than 1,000 people were injured. And so, I do want to just mention that we know that the story has taken place and we will have more information as time goes on. I don't know if there's anything you want to comment on here or if we want to wait till next week as we have more details and more information. But what we know now, or what's been reported, I should say, is that 130 people experienced loss of life and 1,000 people were injured in this RSF attack. Any thoughts on this before we get into the rest of the stories?
I guess just as a quick comment, we did talk about in previous weeks, we've been talking a lot about the UAE role in Africa, and I've mentioned a few times that the UAE is heavily involved in what's going on in Sudan. So that video is up. So if people want to have more information, they can look and watch the latest African Stream video about how the UAE is funding this particular war in Sudan.
Great. So everybody do that and refresh yourselves before we get into the story more next week of what just recently happened. Okay, so with that, there was another failed coup attempt. It was a very, very big news week on the continent. Not only a big news week, but obviously, a dangerous one for many. So there was a failed coup attempt in Burkina Faso on the 17th of May, Friday of last week. Residents in Burkina Faso took to the streets, gathering at the famous Round Point to defend Ibrahim Traoré at the first sign of an attempted coup. The civilians said that they heard gunshots fired near the presidential palace and called for a mass mobilization to express a clear message of support and popular defense for the Traoré government. Reports state that the individuals sought to attack a presidential guard in order to enter the presidential building. Some are calling for this the third coup attempt against him. So, Inem, I know you were the journalist who made it to the scene and spoke to folks there. So let's go ahead and jump to that video and have your commentary on the other side, since you are actually in the country and have dealt with it yourself.
Oui, c'est vrai, aux environs de 17h, nous avons entendu des tirs venant en fait du côté de la présidence. Voilà, donc on a lancé la lettre et immédiatement les gens se sont retrouvés dehors. Voilà, d'habitude ça se passe comme ça, parce qu'avec l'impérialisme, il faut faire beaucoup attention.
Il faut faire la veille citoyenne pour protéger en tout cas nos autorités, afin qu'ils puissent mener à bien leur mission qui est de reconquérir le territoire.
Il faut comprendre, ce n'est pas Ibrahim Traoré nous soutient. On soutient la nation. Et il s'est porté volontaire pour porter la nation très haut. Et c'est une obligation pour nous de le soutenir. Forcément. Si on le laisse tomber, c'est la nation qui tombe. Donc soutenir Ibrahim Traoré, c'est soutenir la nation.
Nous restons focus. Nous restons focus. Personne ne viendra en tout cas déranger notre leader éclairé et ses hommes, et le camarade capitaine Ibrahim Traoré. Et nous sommes là jusqu'au petit matin et ça sera comme ça.
Voilà, c'est l'occasion aussi pour nous de leur faire comprendre que le peuple est mobilisé et le peuple restera toujours mobilisé. Voilà, c'est vrai, nous avons connu les mêmes difficultés en 1987, mais cette fois-ci, c'est l'occasion pour nous et cela ne va jamais passer comme ça.
Oh, I think you're still muted.
Yes, sorry about that. So I think this is an interesting story because, obviously it hits close to home for you as someone who actually is living in Burkina Faso, and you were on the ground speaking to folks. You lived this. And so some of the folks, you could see the support around Traoré. One even said he volunteered to help this nation and we need to be behind him, right? And so it's clear that the support is troves for him. And so this failed coup attempt, it's interesting to see how quickly people mobilized to show support. And so with that, I'd love to hear from you. You spoke to the people on the ground. You lived this experience. So what was the experience like, and what were you hearing from folks beyond what we saw in this video?
I mean, it's amazing how quickly people here respond to any sort of anything involving Ibrahim Traoré or the Burkina Faso government being attacked in any way. So whether it's like Western media propaganda, which we saw a couple of weeks ago when people came out in front of the U.S. embassy to denounce the U.S.'s declaration against the Burkina Faso government, to this attempted coup, people are really on high alert. And so it was really cool to be there on the ground and to see it. So, people were like surrounding this, it's like this meeting place near the center of the city called the United Nations Round Point. And so a lot of different organizations were there. There were banners everywhere that says our sovereignty is non-negotiable. Those are actually all across the city. And people were giving speeches about how much Ibrahim Traoré means to them. A lot of people, most of the people actually were speaking More, which is the local language of Burkina Faso, and just expressing their support for the president. And I got to talk to people, and I think, I have a couple other stories that are coming out. One of them may be coming out today, again, about something similar that happened over the weekend. So Ibrahim Traoré has been given a 5-year extension to his term as now the president of Burkina Faso. Before, he was the president of the transition, but now he is the president of Burkina Faso. And so I talked to people on the street. They're ecstatic. People were actually calling for 10 years. That was the cry of the people, 10 years, 10 years. So, Burkina Faso really has not seen a president as popular as Ibrahim Traoré since the time of Thomas Sankara. He really is the beloved leader of the people. And it's so clear. I just want to make it very clear, to everybody who watches this, I don't cut out any of the interviews that I do in Burkina Faso. It's not I interviewed somebody and they said something and I didn't like it, so I didn't include it. Every person, that I've talked to got included in that video, and it's the same as the one that's going to come out later today. And so, it's just overwhelmingly the majority of the people really, really support Ibrahim Traoré. And I'll do another video soon also about the Citizens Night Watch. A lot of people don't know that there's a Citizens Night Watch that happens in all 45 provinces across Burkina Faso every single night. So this is a voluntary thing that people have organized where they stay up until 4 or 5 a.m. They do it in a rotation, basically, but all across the country every single night to, make sure that everything's okay. There's just, in the case that something like this happens, where there is a coup attempt, anything suspicious that could be a threat to Ibrahim Traoré or the Burkina Faso government. And I think one of the people that, spoke here summarizes so well when he said, it's not really about Ibrahim Traoré. Yes, it's about him as a leader, but it's about the nation. It's about the people, it's about the country, it's about the nation, the homeland. And so that's really what this is. Ibrahim Traoré, represents the interests of the people, of the homeland. And that's why the people are come out so quickly and so regularly in his defense.
Awesome. And really quickly, can you remind us of some of the things he's implemented or he's working on since coming into power, right? Because I think it's really important to understand that you see the people supporting him. It's obviously a groundswell of support, right? It's coming from the people, but there's a reason why they support him. It wasn't just rhetoric, right? He's actually following through on some of the promises. So can we walk through some of the things in terms of farming and power and stuff that he's working on so that people can get a refresher as to why he is so popular?
Okay, so the number one priority for the nation right now, before all else, is addressing the security crisis. So Burkina Faso currently has paramilitary death squads that are operating along the border regions, especially around the Mali-Burkina border, and some going into also the Niger side. And so that's the number one thing that Ibrahim Traoré and the government are addressing right now. And so they've had massive success already in, both organizing the population to fight against these death squads, but also recuperating certain territories. So I've seen people who, for years have not been able to go into certain regions of Burkina Faso, who are now, taking pictures and sending it to different WhatsApp groups. If I'm here for the first time in years, I would not have gone here this time, a year ago, and now they're there. So that's really the biggest thing. First and foremost, it's just there's a security crisis, a safety crisis, and that people need to have that addressed. Then there's all sorts of other things tied to the security crisis. People have just no confidence in France and France's military, as well as other NATO-aligned military. So they're really excited that France has been given the boot, and that they do have more trust with Russia and other countries. And so they do. There is some excitement to have what many people deem to be an actual, more legitimate partnership that could work in their interests. Tied to that, we've also seen these new partners, as opposed to the neo-colonial powers who were never partners, sign certain plans and programs for the industrialization of Burkina Faso, helping to build more factories and refineries. And then the nuclear power plant is a big one that's been a deal that's been signed that's to be worked on by next year. There's been certain industries that have been nationalized, sugar being one of them, some of the gold mines being the other ones. Another one, there's like a new sort of cooperative economic, I guess, model that has been implemented called like actionnariat populaire, which is basically just like workers co-ops, in a type of worker co-op that is being used for job creation. So allowing community members to have a stake in these like local businesses, and they're doing all sorts of sort of smaller. Well, they're doing also doing agricultural stuff. There's doing like certain types of like smaller scale industrial stuff. So that's the actionnariat populaire, which is creating jobs across the country. And then, the government is also just giving a lot of resources to farmers right now to really boost agricultural production. So those are, I know I talked a lot, but these are really important updates. And I think there's a lot around the Sahel that is confusing to people because it's so different from the West. It's a very different political reality, and it's a very different sort of model. And so a lot of people might not understand like what's going on, and why is it that these things are happening without elections, but this is what overwhelmingly the people do want, and the countries are not able to hold elections because of the security crisis. They need to recuperate lands that are literally under occupation.
Well put. And I'm glad we were able to go over that. It looks like some of the commenters were saying thank you for that. I think that was really, it was important to talk about that, because although, there's been a lot of discussion about the negative impacts of coups, except for when the West is the one doing it. You see in this case, this transition of power, even though it happened in a way that didn't happen through a democracy, has led to positive outcomes, or at least the beginning of what looks like are going to be a positive impact. And we've already seen some of the impact already happening today. There's a question about, is this more of an authoritative model? And this conversation I think comes up a lot, where the folks who are used to democracies only and what people mostly consider a peaceful transfer of power, that almost always is equated with a better model. And I think what's important here is to understand that although this didn't happen that way, it having a positive impact on the country. But what would you say to that, where someone says, would you say this is even, would you say that this is more an authoritative model? And why is this different than the previous transitions or the previous people who ran the country?
First of all, on the question of democracy, I would say one of the people I interviewed, I believe it was Aruna Tapsoba. I might have to double check that another time. But he told me later on that he considers what's going on to be a democracy, because a democracy is the rule of the people. And so he says that he believes that this is actually the purest form of democracy that Burkina Faso has had in a very long time. And so I thought that was very interesting, because we don't usually see leaders that actually involve the people, regular citizens, in not just the election time, but like every sort of decision and that goes on in the country. It's first developed through forms of popular support, popular calls, and then they're adopted by the state. But in terms of whether or not it's an authoritative model, I would say it's a more collectivist model. And I think that's something that, I myself, it's been a learning curve for me, because I had to learn that it's very, it's a different kind of model than what we're used to in the US. But I would say that overwhelmingly, I would say it's a collectivist model, in the sense that it's much more about the collective as a whole than about individuals. So it's not a model that's going to allow for specific individuals to basically ruin what the gains are for the masses, for the majority of the population. It is about choosing the majority over choosing like, you know, an individual or a minority. You know, it's about the homeland. That's how people phrase it, how they talk about it. It's about the nation. It's about the country as a whole. So I think it's a much better understanding to, you know, is it authoritative? I would say it's collectivist.
Good point. I well put. And you know, and you've already described how the general public is volunteering to help secure and to continue to support Traore and everything he's doing. You don't see that in other places, right? That are like looking to protect it because it's the will of the people, as you said. So, you know, obviously this seems to be working, and I'm looking forward to seeing how this continues to progress. So now moving on to the next story. I mean, we've talked a bit about Burkina Faso here, and it's good to be kind of get that context and that background. We're going to move on to Kenya and how it seems as if the Sahel states and other parts, in some cases of West Africa, are distancing themselves from the West and the global North. And what you're seeing with Kenya and other parts of East Africa, Rwanda in particular, where they seem to be strengthening their relationships with the West. And so in this first video, we're going to talk about the last gasp effort to stop Kenyan police being sent to Haiti. If you remember, we reported on this during one of our earlier lives that we did together between African Stream and Authentic African. And so you might remember that around 1,000 troops or police are due to go, quote unquote, restore order. And the first 200 are expected to arrive this week in Haiti. So there's a legal team from a Kenyan opposition party says that President Ruto is in breach of a high court ruling. They've now submitted another court application after judges previously declared their mission unconstitutional. Despite that, though, Ruto, president of Kenya, pushed ahead with the plan and signed a deal with Haiti's then prime minister in March. So human rights groups have condemned the deployment, saying previous interventions were disastrous for Haiti. Washington, D.C. in the United States is promising to pay Nairobi $100 million for sending its officers. U.S. forces will also build a base on the island to accommodate those Kenyan officers. And so let's watch this video, and we'll have some commentary on the other side.
Okay, I think this one is actually just it's an infographic.
Okay, it's infographic. So, again, Kenyan lawyers in a race to block deployment of the 1,000 police in Haiti. The legal team from Kenya Opposition Party, as I mentioned, has filed another court application. They argue the Nairobi government is in contempt of the high court ruling against the move. So it's declared deployment illegal, as I mentioned before. President Ruto still insists to push ahead. And as I mentioned, the first officers were meant to arrive in Port-au-Prince last week, and others are supposed to be going this week now. And of course, it's a U.S.-based mission. So with that, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. We had this conversation weeks ago, and this was as, these opposition groups were attempting, lawyers, in fact, not just opposition groups, but folks who know the law, legally finding ways to try to thwart this attempt. And it seems that President Ruto is using his executive powers to go ahead with it anyway, because it's conditioned with $100 million, which is interesting, right? And other potential. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on this and your commentary around this particular story, and then we'll talk a little bit more about some of the other stories that it seems are happening because of this, or this is making way for other strengthened relations with the U.S. But what are your thoughts on this particular deployment of police troops, police officers?
I think what you pointed out is so important. The United States absolutely was the one that called Kenya to do this. This was like a U.S. initiative where they went to Kenya and said, hey, can you invade Haiti basically on our behalf? The U.S. as well as the core group, which is U.S., Canada, France, especially, have been at the forefront of invading Haiti for a very long time. I mean, on and off at various stages in Haiti's history, really since the revolution, because the U.S. did occupy Haiti even in the early 20th century, but especially since they overthrew the former President Jean-Bertrand Aristide in 2004, there's been a huge effort to keep Haiti destabilized, to keep Bertrand Aristide's party, Famille Lavalas, out of power. And yeah, just to keep pretty much Haiti in this sort of state where, to justify constant intervention. And at a certain point, the optics of having these, white colonial imperialist countries invade Haiti, the optics just kind of got bad. And so, the United States and the rest of the core group have changed their strategy a bit. And, they've done this, also within the context of the Caribbean. So the same way we struggle on the African continent with U.S. allied or Western allied countries, the Caribbean has the same reality. So CARICOM states, which is the Caribbean community, has betrayed Haiti on numerous occasions. But finding this sort of blackface to U.S. imperialism through this Kenyan intervention, it's super unpopular in Haiti. It's super unpopular in Kenya. Actually, both sides have come out. Haitians especially have really protested any sort of intervention, military intervention on their soil, including the Kenyan one. They're very clear that they don't want this. Kenyans have organized events saying that they also don't approve of their government doing this, that Ruto is not acting on behalf of the Kenyan people or in the Kenyan people's interest. This is not something that is popular among Kenyans. There was a protest just over this weekend in Washington, D.C., where the Haitian community, picketed and protested in front of the U.S. In front of the White House in D.C. Because of this plan to have Kenya basically intervene on the U.S.'s behalf and to play this role. So I think it's sad that this is like the state that we're in. This is why we talk about Pan-Africanism, because right now we're just pitting Africans against each other, having Africans do the dirty work of the U.S. how many miles away. It's like, it's so hard when it comes to like connecting the struggle of the people. When a place, Kenya, far off in East Africa, and Haiti, a French-speaking Caribbean island, to have that kind of grassroots connection. But then, we look at who holds the power in this world, and it's imperialist, capitalist, neo-colonialist. And it's so easy then for them now to bring these Africans together in the context of doing something just really heinous and violent. And also, just to add to this last point, these Kenyan police forces they've been under heat, and they've been called out by various human rights organizations for brutally abusing Kenyan protesters as well. If you remember, Kenya was in a state of protest. I believe it was around this time last year, if I'm not getting my time frame mixed up. And the Kenyan police were under some heat, for the level of police brutality meted out against these protesters, and now they're being sent over to Haiti. So these are police forces that are not even popular or reputable, or I don't know. They don't have the best reputation even on their own soil. So imagine what they're going to do now on a Caribbean island, how many thousands of kilometers and miles away.
Yeah, and with the explicit struggle of Haiti are disapproving of this. So with that, I also, one of the comments here, which I wanted to make sure we got clarity on, is it's not even $100 million in cash. It's loan forgiveness. Is that correct? The $100 million, or what is this? What is the $100 million that Kenya is receiving? Is it loan forgiveness, or is it actually cash for this this operation?
That's a good question. I have to double check. I mean, we do have it here, or is it listed here? Because I actually, no, I don't think it's listed here.
No, it was just in the description. We had mentioned that it was $100 million that we'll be getting. It looks like some folks are saying that they believe that it's loan forgiveness. It's not even cash. I mean, of course, $100 million can't, you know, I don't know if that should be used to justify the move, whether it's loan forgiveness or cash. But it seems as though that is the means to an ends that it looks like President Ruto is looking at, right? So whether it is cash or loan forgiveness, it seems as though that is the calculation he's making. And obviously, the people of Kenya and the people of Haiti both don't care about that. So
yeah, I mean, I feel like within like a geopolitical type of deal like this, $100 million, especially, you know, Kenya, that's not really that much money. And so I think that there's something else going on. And I think the next stories that we get into about what's really going on with the Kenya and the US right now is going to give a little bit more context into what Kenya has to gain. Because I think it's like the money's a part of it. But I think there's this whole thing going on beyond just $100 million, you know, cash prize that is really pushing Kenya into this role.
Absolutely. And so with that, I think we can get into the next story, which doesn't speak to that as much, but the next video, it does talk about how Ruto is not necessarily reading the room, I would say, you know, considering all of this heat on him about what has been going on. This next video, I think, really speaks to how he's operating in his own world differently from his constituents, right? The kind of the opposite of what we're seeing in Burkina Faso, right? So I'll go into give you guys a little bit of context, and then we'll get into the video here. But it was described as the flying prez. That's what some people are calling him. Strikes again, and it was $100 million. Sorry, it's $100 million. $1.5 million spent on a private jet to the United States. So Kenyans were already pretty upset about what they call flying presidents. Clocking up air miles at a huge cost to the country's strained budget already. Well, now, of course, they're not as excited even to hear now that he is flying a private plane from Dubai's Royal Jet for his visit to the U.S., and it's going to cost $1.5 million. Obviously, it adds insult to injury for the millions of cost of living affected Kenyans. He's need to start tightening their belts and living within their means, and on whom his administration intends to impose new taxes. So while Ruto flaunts it in front of his people, he's also being put to shame by other leaders, setting a far noble example. For example, Iceland's prime minister recently flew Kenya Airways on his visit to Malawi, which is interesting, right? So the president of Kenya does not fly on Kenyan Airways. And other presidents who fly to Kenya fly on Kenyan Airways. So obviously his administration hasn't apologized and seems to be continuing to do what they want to do on, you know, and spending money that it seems that the country doesn't have. And on this trip, Ruto will be signing contracts with the U.S., which we'll see actually if they have economic benefits to Kenya. So with that, let's jump into the video and we'll have some commentary. So it looks like the connection, we have a bit of a connection issue playing this video. If you all can hear me, I'll just continue to kind of talk through it until we get Inem back. I think we may have lost her to internet connectivity. But look, one of the things that you see here is that it's a very clear example of what Ruto's doing versus what other heads of state are doing. You have someone from Iceland traveling to Kenya on Kenya Airlines or Kenya Airways, or KQ, many people call it. But Ruto himself is flying on a Dubai airline for $1.5 million to go to the U.S. to further relations with the U.S. and in a time where his country people are very dissatisfied and unhappy with how things have been going and the moves that he's been making. So when I said earlier, it seems like he's not reading the room. He's making decisions based on what he decides he wants to do, not what the people are looking for. And so, some people are in the comments here talking about he needs to be careful, never trust the West. He traveled with an entourage of 30 people to the U.S. Now, this is what the comments are saying. We don't have that particular reporting from African Stream or myself at Authentic African, but I thought I'd read through some of the comments until Inem gets back. One of the challenges with living on the continent in West Africa is the power challenges, and that is one of the things that you see that Ibrahim Traore is doing in Burkina Faso to try to solve for that. And, West Africa doesn't have nuclear power at this point in time, and that's why they're having these conversations. Sierra Leone is having conversations with Russia about nuclear power. Burkina Faso is having conversations with Russia about nuclear power. And obviously it's needed because you have moments like this where the power can go out and it makes it difficult to be able to operate in today's world. So provide triggers for evolution says Ruto has just spent 1.5 million in his private jet to the US. He's traveled 50 plus times out of the country to the West, all on Kenyan taxpayers' money. Now, it's interesting, right? Because Ruto and his administration have told people to tighten their budgets. They've actually communicated to folks to try to minimize your costs, your spending and your costs. Meanwhile, he's taking a $1.5 million private jet trip from a Dubai-based airline to the United States. I mean, you cannot be reading the room you couldn't be reading the room any more poorly than that. So the video cut off, I think, Inem, as you were playing it, but where we last left off, and then we can just throw it to you for commentary. And I just kind of read through some of the comments and just gave my thoughts in the meantime. Where we last left off is that spokesperson for President Ruto actually said that the costs have benefits, right? And we didn't get to if they were able to describe any benefits, but obviously they cannot justify these kinds of expenditures considering the country already has debt issues, right? To go further into debt, and you have an airline, right? Kenya Airways is an airline that does fly. And so it's interesting that he chose to fly on a private jet unnecessarily if other presidents do not. And so I'd love to get your commentary on this, given the earlier discussion we were having on the Haitian troops, and leading into this conversation we'll be having about cozying up to the West. But I think this is critical because it's the use of taxpayer dollars in excess, which is just kind of adds insult to injury. So I'd love to get your commentary on that.
Thank you. I apologize for having to hop off for a second there. I do live in Burkina Faso, which is one of the hottest countries on earth. You can Google it. So my computer overheated. This is just part of the deal of being based in Burkina Faso. It's interesting. African Stream actually just posted an update on this story today. And it was interesting to see some of the numbers. So I guess I'm not really sure, like myself, who did the calculation, but somebody calculated and said that, they could have flown the entire entourage with Ruto on the local Kenyan Airways, and it would have costed $80,000 instead of the, $1.5 million. So it wasn't really a necessary cost. They showed that difference. It would have been $80,000 had they flown everybody on the local airways. And then also just to show that, they pointed out there's sort of a pattern of behavior here with Ruto's frequent flights and expensive flights. They said that his flights have costed taxpayers $10 million so far. So, you know, he's spending money quite, I guess, in quite a relaxed way when it comes to these flights. And I think it also is interesting to think about, you know, we were just talking about numbers in the context of Haiti and how 100,000 isn't really that much to be, you know, invading another country, to be sent off to invading another country. But then meanwhile,
Yeah, and I think we may have lost Inem again. But that's a good point. So with that calculation, right, $80,000 could have been spent to fly the entire entourage to the United States on Kenya Airways. And if you think about that, that is a $900,000+ additional cost for him to fly his entourage to the United States, which could have been easily used to solve all kinds of other challenges and issues locally, internally in Kenya. I mean, that is an egregious misuse of power and misuse of funds, you know, the country's funds. I mean, there's no other way around it, right? If it could have been done for $80,000 and he did it for 1.5 million, I mean, that literally is 930. Sorry, no, 950 or so, 970, like about 970 or so in that range, $1,000 above what it needed to cost. That is outrageous, as AK Ando says. You know, AK Ando says craziness. Doing Gravy TV says President Ibrahim Traore is the answer for Africa. Once he gets situated, he should consider granting us kidnapped Africans from America citizenship. It would change the game. Yeah, I think there's a lot to be said about that, and I think in this conversation, right, we can actually this whole live that we've done today, we can juxtapose the two, right? You can look at what's happening in Burkina Faso. There was an attempted coup, and the will of the people is saying, we don't want to remove Ibrahim Traore from office. This is what he's doing is exactly what we've wanted. And they are supporting him in troves. They are going out and doing voluntary watches, right? I mean, people are taking turns watching neighborhoods and ensuring there isn't another coup happening as voluntary forces. This is not people that the military is forcing to do it. I mean, obviously Inem is there in person and she's seeing it live and in person, how people have decided themselves to take on the task of protecting their country. And they booted out the French because they haven't really helped with some of these paramilitary groups that are in the country that are disrupting things, right? And some of these extremists. And so, you know, Ibrahim Traore and his team of military and his you know, now the country's military have begun to thwart any of those challenges and issues. And then you look at that in comparison to Kenya, where you're hearing the will of the people. You're even hearing people using law, the Kenyans' laws, to say that what they're doing, sending troops to Haiti or sending police officers to Haiti, is unconstitutional. They are against the travel that he is taking. $1.5 million versus $80,000 and what it should have cost for him to make that trip to the US. And then the next stories that we were planning to go through, if we're able to get Inem back, just speak to, you know, his cozying up more with the West. And so now that Inem's back, what I'll do is I'll give some more context to that particular story. And if we are able to, we'll play a video. If not, we can still give commentary. So, you know, we were just talking about the travel, how expensive the travel was, 1.5 million versus what it should have cost, which was $80,000. And that was to go to the United States to meet the president of the United States and to talk about furthering relations. And so on that topic, kind of, you know, transition to the next discussion, and that's around Kenya moving closer to NATO after Biden, U.S. president, said he's working with Congress to designate the East African country as a non-NATO ally. So this is an official designation. It would make Kenya the 4th African country to have that status after Morocco, Tunisia, and Egypt. Now, I think what's interesting is the other 3 countries are all North African countries. Kenya would be the first considered sub-Saharan African country that would be added into this designation. So while some see it as a win for President Ruto, and I mean that's some meaning the West, others, meaning folks on the ground, say that Kenyan leader is abandoning his non-alignment policy favored by previous administrations. So there was a non-alignment policy that was favored by previous administrations. I think that kept Kenya as an independent, sovereign actor. It also reports a growing security divide in Africa. As we mentioned, the Sahelian states are going away and ditching Washington's military deals and bases, something that concerns the U.S., of course, and amid growing Russian and Chinese, what they call influence on the continent. Ruto's 3-day trip, to the United States visit also spotlights the deployment of the 1,000 Kenyan police that we mentioned where he was planning to send to Haiti. They'll form part of a Washington-funded, UN-backed multinational force to, quote, restore order on the island. The U.S. has pledged $200 million for the mission, and it's been delayed, of course, amidst a lot of last-minute legal challenges in Kenya. So I don't know if we're able to queue up the video. I know there have been some technical challenges. Inem, are we able to queue up the video?
So this is actually an infographic. Let me see if I can get it up.
Yeah, so, okay, perfect. So, and it just kind of speaks to what I just said, right? You know, obviously he's planning to designate, Kenya as a non-NATO ally. So, you know, I'm not going to read through everything on the screen here since I just went through it, but I'd love to get your thoughts, Inem, on this particular topic, right? I mean, we just talked about the egregious spending for the trip. Now, what is coming out of the trip, I think, is interesting. And so can you give some context to the non-NATO ally status and what you think this means for Kenya and the relationship with the United States?
So being a major non-NATO ally is basically, it's saying that, you know, this is not a country that qualifies to be part of NATO. You know, NATO is a composition of white, so-called Western countries for the most part. But it's saying that, you know, Kenya is an official U.S. ally and officially aligned also with the U.S. military, U.S. Army. And like you mentioned, this is the first so-called sub-Saharan African country to be a U.S. non-NATO ally. So in a way, it's like Kenya has kind of officially become U.S.'s lapdog now. Like we've seen Kenya and the U.S. Kenya moving closer to the U.S. through Ruto, doing things, you know, to please the United States. But this is really as close as you can get, is having this sort of status, which just means that, you know, push comes to shove, Kenya is going to be answering to the United States, you know, backing U.S. foreign policy decisions. And what we're seeing in Haiti is part of this. I mean, this is kind of like, you know, when I said that I don't think it's just about the money, I think this is really the other piece, which is that, you know, Kenya has now secured its sort of spot as one of the U.S.'s sort of favorites now. You know, favorites in a neo-colonial sense, of course, not any sort of proximity towards equality between the two states, but, you know, to have this sort of, you know, what Ruto is viewing is, I guess, as a privilege and as an honor to now officially be you're subjugated to, you know, U.S. foreign policy decisions and to have to ally with the United States at every turn. And I think what you pointed out is like there is a huge contrast to what's going on in the Sahel and what's going on in Kenya right now. You know, we are coming out of a period where every single country, with the sole exception of Eritrea, which is pretty close to Kenya, had a U.S. A military agreement with the United States, with AFRICOM. Now we're seeing that Niger has broken that. So Niger is now the second country after Eritrea to not have that kind of accord. And here we have Kenya that is now swearing its allegiance basically to the U.S. Army, to the U.S. military, saying that it may not be a NATO member, but it is going to be an ally with the U.S. Army. It is going to be part it's going to hold on to defense agreements. It's going to back, the U.S., in any sort of context of war, of defense, etc. So, it's interesting, and I think it's also this is going to be a major potential threat also to African countries that are trying to move or have already moved in another direction. So again, I mentioned, Eritrea is not far from Kenya. Eritrea is a country that has, for a long time, really asserted its sovereignty, and has stood up to the United States when other African countries were not doing it. So this could be something that is dangerous for Eritrea. And then again, Niger, then, who's making this move in real time. Now we have this player on the continent. We already have Morocco and Tunisia on the continent playing this role, and then we have a third player on this continent who could potentially be even more sort of a threat to the ambitions of sovereignty of those African countries that are not willing to submit in that way.
Well put. And I think I think we'll have to continue to follow this closely and see what happens. I mean, it is disappointing to see, and it seems counter to the other movements we're seeing on the continent that have really had a lot of support from people on the ground. So we'll have to kind of see how this continues and what ends up happening. I think what we can do is we can end the live here. We've now kind of addressed the many different challenges we're seeing with Kenya, and we got to see that juxtaposed with what is happening in the Congo. And so with that, I think what we can do is we can bring this to a close. I think what we'll do is we'll continue to follow this story, and as the weeks go on, we'll continue to report on it. We will also be reporting on any of the additional changes that happen in the Congo as we get more information, and of course in Burkina Faso. So with that, if you guys haven't already, make sure you subscribe to Authentic African on YouTube. Make sure you also subscribe to African Stream on YouTube, and follow us across all platforms. We're on TikTok, Twitter, Instagram. We have quite a big following, both groups on Instagram, so you can find us both there. The logos are all the same, so you'll know it when you find it. And make sure you tune in weekly as we go through this week's news and events. Before we bring this to a close, are there any final thoughts from you, Ina?
No major final thoughts. Just appreciate everybody's patience. When you live in Burkina, technical issues are inevitable. Our technologies that we're using are not designed for Sahelian heat. So when Africa is free and liberated, we're going to be making our tech here. And so we will have our climate in mind. But as of now, Western imported tech, all that is very, very sensitive to the kind of heat that we experience in this part of the world.
Oh, maybe that was my connection. But yes. Okay, yes, I agreed. All of the above. Well, thank you for that, Inam. And thank you all for watching. We will see you guys all on the next live. Bye, guys.